As of this recording, it's been almost 120 days since the Eaton fire. And while the official investigation is still underway, all signs for the cause of the fire are pointing in one direction: Southern California Edison. According to Pedro Pizarro, CEO of Edison International, it's now probable that SoCal Edison's equipment started the fire. The utility disclosed back in February that its power lines may have been involved, and since then, nothing has surfaced to suggest an alternative cause. It could be another 12 to 18 months for CAL FIRE and other investigators to reach a proper conclusion. But that hasn't stopped lawsuits from piling up. The County of Los Angeles, the City of Pasadena, Sierra Madre, they've all filed claims. If Edison's found liable, they'll lean first on their $1 billion self-insurance fund, then tap into California's $21 billion wildfire fund, the same one utility companies across the state rely on to avoid bankruptcy. So what does this mean for Altadena citizens? Well, in my experience, it means the vultures are out. Here's an actual text I received from a lawyer that heard from a friend of my sister-in-law's about us losing our home. I'm changing the names for privacy reasons, but other than that, this is word for word what he sent me on a Saturday night back in February. Hi, Austin. My name is Derek A-hole. I'm a friend of Jill Bystander, who knows your sister-in-law. By way of background, I've been a trial lawyer for over 35 years and have handled many fire cases against SoCal Edison since I live in Malibu. Nice flex, Derek A-hole. Sorry, I didn't mean to get distracted. We'll get back to the text. I had cases against SoCal Edison for the Woolsey fire, including my own, and know the protocol and the players. I understand that you unfortunately lost your house too as a result of the Eaton fire in Altadena. I'm handling a few select cases out there for friends just by word of mouth. There are many firms out there taking as many cases as they can. And I'm taking enough cases where I can really work them up and be in contact with the clients. I am so sorry that you lost your home. Please let me know if I can help you. I will be in Altadena tomorrow to talk to my clients. Perhaps we can meet or talk on the phone. I would be honored to help you. I will text Anna as well. Thank you. Now, on the surface, this isn't the worst text. But then came the calls, then the voicemails to both Anna and I every day for 10 days. It didn't stop until my sister-in-law told him we signed with someone else, which isn't true, but it needed to be true for this guy. Look, I'm in sales. I know the tricks, the fake urgency, the appearance of scarcity and an intimate client experience, downplaying the competition. I mean, it's hacky and it didn't work on us. But given everything the community's going through, it could easily have worked on one of our neighbors. We're still in pain. We have a lot of decisions to make. We have a lot of balls floating in the air right now. We don't need these leeches. So when I was introduced to today's guests, attorneys Courtney Vasquez and Santo Ricobino, and they told me to take my time, do my research, and they would be there to answer any questions I may have along the way, I was finally able to exhale. In full transparency, I have not signed on with their firm, Ellis and Riccobono. But given their approach and expertise on this topic, they were the only attorneys I felt comfortable inviting onto the pod to explain all the questions our community has about the upcoming battle with Edison. And spoiler alert, they deliver the goods. We dive into everything from contingency fees to the intersection of insurance to their firm's relationship with Edison's counsel and much more. This episode isn't about deciding what to do next. It's about figuring out what's even true. What are the facts? What's the timeline? What's the process? Because when your life's been ripped apart, you deserve real information, not a bunch of unsolicited text from some Malibu a-hole named Derek. I'm Austin LaRoche, and this is the Altadena Rebuild. Episode 6, Damages. Courtney and Santo, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us, Austin.
Hi there.
All right.
Thank you.
So let's start with Ellis and Riccobono. How did the firm start and what drove its evolution towards becoming fire attorneys?
Sure. Yeah, our firm started. My partner and I, we worked together at another firm. We were a trial team together, and we worked well together and wanted to do our own thing our way. And we've always worked on catastrophic injury cases, wrongful death, some class actions. And as we're seeing fires happen year in and year out, we evolved our practice to start handling those kinds of cases. Our attorneys have been working on fire cases since 2015, starting with the Butte fire, also then the North Bay fire, the Thomas fire, Camp fire, and now we're here today with the Eaton fire. We joined forces with two other firms, Barron and Budd and Diop Chambers, because we're a smaller firm, and so when we have big fires like this one, we need to do group up so that we can properly represent our clients and give individual attention that we have been in the other cases.
And so this is the collective that is now known as the Wildfire Attorneys. If you go to fireattorneys.com, this is the group, right? You and these other firms you just mentioned?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. All right. So we've gotten a lot of bad information as a community thus far. And a few weeks back, I saw a note from some legal webinar that indicated any firm that specializes in wildfire cases was a red flag, even if they can name off all the fires you just named off somehow. And we know attorneys are all trying to say the right things to sign up clients, but why should our Altadena neighbors lean into a firm that's part of this wildfire attorney collective and really wears their expertise as a badge of honor?
Yeah, I mean, I think any firm that says you got to watch out for firms that specialize in wildfire cases, I mean, that's a red flag right there. They're especially this fire, it being in LA, and every billboard attorney in Los Angeles is seeing an opportunity and jumping in these cases, and so they're seeing that there are some firms like ours that do specialize in these cases, and they're saying those things so they can get the cases even though they don't know what they're doing. So I think it's really important to go with a firm that is specialized in wildfire cases. There's specific nuances of these cases that for the law we've dealt and other firms have dealt with Edison's attorneys, Edison as a defendant before. And so there's specific things that help us in getting to the table and getting our clients a fair settlement.
All right, let's talk about Edison. All right, I try to make sure I walk the right line and say the right things with you guys, but I know there's this belief that the devastation of the wildfires is directly correlated to what we'll call mishaps from SoCal Edison. And your website's very careful in the language and what you advertise, in regards of those of us affected by the Eaton fire. So what can we publicly say about the work that we're doing right now and why, Southern California Edison, a subsidiary of Edison International, is linked to that work?
Yeah, so the investigation is very much ongoing and underway. For the last 2 months, we've been in Eaton Canyon at the area of origin alongside Edison personnel, our experts, their experts. We've been collecting and preserving and testing and removing some of the electrical infrastructure that looks to be suspected in the Eaton fire cause. And so while I can't share, public details at this time about what that's all showing, what I can say is that even Edison's executive has come out in the last month and made some public admissions that are suggesting that even he's recognizing their electrical infrastructure was involved in the ignition, right? So he made some statements in an LA Times article that it recognized that the leading hypothesis right now is that the fire was ignited from their equipment. And then even just a couple weeks ago, he again recognized that at least at this point, there isn't, strong alternative causes either. So all of that is to say that things are moving along, well, and we're getting a lot of good information, and we'll continue to obviously be there, consider everything, and continue to pursue the theories that it's looking like the electrical infrastructure was involved.
And why do you think Edison's CEO has just come out and said all of that instead of, being quiet, let's say?
Yeah, so that's difficult, right? I don't have access to the mind and strategies, but I think in this case we are dealing with some very strong evidence, right, that we don't often get in a lot of the other cases that we have. So in this case, it's been unique. We have some video surveillance evidence that suggests, the start was tied to the electrical equipment. We have some photographic evidence that shows that. And then what we're seeing in the field, like I said, even he's recognizing so far there isn't some other cause, which sometimes can be the case in other cases. So, while I can't, comment necessarily on some of the strategies, there comes a point when you have to at least recognize, hey, there's not much I can say, at this point, other than what's just the straight facts, and that's what we're seeing.
I want to touch on something that Santos said before, which is that, you want people who have dealt with wildfire cases and even specifically SoCal Edison. So can you tell me a little bit about what your relationship is and has been in the past with SoCal Edison, particularly in wildfire cases?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've worked very closely with Edison on a routine basis since the 2017 Thomas Fire. And really, it didn't stop there, right? So there was the Thomas Fire. Shortly thereafter, it was the Woolsey Fire. Shortly after that, it's been the Fairview Fire. And then there's been several fires up in Northern California where Edison's attorneys, the same ones that are here representing them in the Eaton Fire, have represented other utilities in Northern California that we've also been involved in. And so it's been a constant, continual, regular relationship that we've had with them, litigating these cases where electrical infrastructure has been involved in the cause. And so that's just led to a lot of, experience and respect. We have a lot of respect for each other. They know us, we know them. They know our mediator, we work with the same mediators, they know our experts, we know theirs, right? So we're definitely on opposite sides, right? But there has come in all of the years just a level of respect, and we've been able to successfully resolve each and every one of the cases so far.
Yeah, I think sometimes people think of, attorneys and everything through the lens of like pop culture, where everybody is, the stakes are so high and everything's cutthroat and everybody hates each other. And, I think in reality, there's a lot of, to your point, respect that you have to have, because everyone's got to sit down and try and come up with as much of a win-win situation given all the factors, right? I don't think Edison wants to give away millions upon billions of dollars, but they also know that if they are to be found responsible for this, that's just an inevitability. So they want to work with you guys the best as possible. How do they work with you and then all these other attorneys that keep coming out and are asking me to sign on with them? Because it seems like a lot of attorneys want in on this. But how do you kind of get a little bit more of their focus?
From Edison?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, every single Eaton case that's filed gets consolidated and put into one courtroom. So no matter who your attorney is, they all go into the same courtroom. Now, there's probably 15 or so different law firms that are on the steering committees, the leadership. We're on that. But so we're talking with Edison, we're in emails with Edison. There are probably thousands of attorneys that are representing Eaton clients that have no communication at all with Edison's attorneys.
Wow. And so everything kind of funnels to you and the other, what did you say, 15
Yeah.
attorneys, something around there,
Yes.
give or take? And
Correct.
so you guys are the ones, you're in the arena. You're sitting there with them, having the real conversations. And then what's that relationship like with the other 1,000 attorneys who are filing? Are they all having to funnel their communications through you?
Well, at this point, we're in the liability stage, and so everything gets funneled from leadership out to the remaining plaintiffs' attorneys. The other plaintiffs' attorneys won't have much communication with Edison at all at this point. Once we move past the liability stage and into the damages phase and then mediation, then they will have communication with Edison when they're settling their individual cases.
Gotcha. And so that kind of opens the door to, a question of like just what this all looks like, right? Because we all have been told, hey, this is a long process. It's going to take years upon years. You just mentioned some of the phases. Can you kind of break down what it looks like from today to somebody, for lack of a better way of saying it, cashing a check?
Yeah, I mean, it is a long process. We've seen these cases settle between 2 to 4 years, and yeah, I mean, basically what I said is the stages. I mean, we work on the liability. Once that's complete, we start with the damages. We start getting all the information from our clients about how they were affected and the economic damages, their emotional damages. And then we would start in mediation and start settling the cases. If we're unable to settle the cases, then we would go to trial or a binding mediation or arbitration. Trials, we've never had to try a case in California for a fire case. They typically settle, and our clients are always happy with the settlements.
Gotcha. So for a layman like myself, let me make sure I understand. Liability stage, we are going in, we're investigating. Why did this fire happen? Who was, let's just say maybe SoCal Edison, how were they responsible for it? And then in damages, you're working with your clients and you're seeing exactly what was lost across the board. You're seeing what insurance covered, what emotional damages may be. And once you really have established both of those things, then you can go to the table, mediate, and start solving each case. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, cool. So let's talk about the different ways that these lawsuits can be structured, right? There's individual cases, mass torts, class action. These are just things that I Googled, okay? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, so there's 2 class action cases that were filed in this case. We do not believe that that's appropriate. These cases are a mass tort. And so what that means is a mass tort means every individual's case is structured into one courtroom, like I was saying earlier. So mass tort just means a bunch of individual cases together. And so we believe that this is not appropriate for a class action because in a class action, everyone has the same exact damages, right? Your cell phone provider is charging you $20 more a month. How many months did they overcharge you? Those are your damages. Everyone's the same. But here in a fire like this, people evacuated, people have smoke and ash damage, people partially lost their home, completely lost their home, and people died. The area of damages is so wide that this can't be just grouped in a class. Also, in a class action, you can't get emotional damages at all. So it's very important that these cases are presented and settled on an individual basis.
Okay, so that makes complete sense to me because I think of some of my neighbors who they didn't have total losses, but they're still living in a back house or waiting for remediation. Like they've got their own set of issues. I had a total loss. I know there's some renters on our street who also had, who no longer have a place to live, but they didn't own the property. So that makes sense. But there's at least 2 attorneys that have filed class actions that think that's not the best way. What would their argument be if you could try to make it for them?
Gosh, Courtney.
Yeah, I think what I could just say there is, the attorneys that have filed these cases, we haven't seen them in a lot of the other fires, right? So their reasons for filing this, I'm not sure, but I think it lacks the fundamental understanding of how to maximize recoveries for each person that's been affected. And so, like Santo said, it's individualized. It has to be, and particularly for emotional losses, right? I mean, that is something that simply cannot and has not been certified in California before in a fire case. And there's good reason for that, right? Because there's absolutely no way on an emotional level to classify a class-wide damages model for that type of injury.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying makes sense. To me, it's like a marketing ploy because a lot of us don't know anything about this. And we're like, class action. Yeah, we're mad and we're angry, and these people are doing it. And we've seen that on TV. We know that's a thing. And I think it's like a cheap trick to sign people up because everything that you said makes a lot more sense, right? And really looking individually at each person. I feel like anytime when you're working with anybody, like that's how you want to feel like, hey, they're actually looking at me specifically, what happened in my experience, the actual losses that I had, and then how can we make sure that those are, addressed. Let's just say. So
Yeah.
I want to talk. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, and we can talk off air about this, but there's some proprietary things that we do that make sure that our clients' individual damages are at the forefront and are displayed so that Edison knows exactly what they are.
Nice. Okay. All right. I'm definitely going to talk to you guys off air. All right. So I want to talk about the different type of people in our community. We touched on it before, right? We've got homeowners like myself, total losses. We got renters, unsure if they're ever going to be able to return, homeowners with partial losses, and these crazy massive insurance headaches. Like, is there any criteria for which Eaton fire victims should or should not be speaking with an attorney?
I mean, the bottom line is if anyone thinks that they were affected, they should talk to an attorney. We represent people, like we said, business owners, homeowners, renters, evacuees, people who are just at the in the fire zone at the time and had to evacuate. So it's just a wide variety of clients, and it's just everyone who was affected. Now, we have gotten calls from people that, were in Orange County and said, hey, the smoke got to us. We're not representing those people, but they did the right thing in calling an attorney and trying to find out.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So when you make that call, right? Because or people keep calling you, and you have to keep either ignoring them or finally giving them a chance. What should people be looking for when they select an attorney? What misconceptions may exist? What should we be looking for? Try and do this without a sales pitch. Just an honest. This is what people should be looking for. And by the way, we happen to do all of these things, but be as objective as possible.
Yeah, so we've been saying this, a lot on this call, but it truly is really important because it does matter. And so finding an attorney that has the wildfire specific track record, right? We have a proven record of success against all the major utilities in California and then even in other states across the nation too. And it's key, right? Like Santa said at the very beginning, there are nuances. We have successfully recovered our firm collectively $1.7 billion in wildfire-specific recoveries, right? You're going to see a lot of numbers out there that may just be, general recoveries for a personal injury case or, like a car accident or even a business dispute, what have you. But it's important. Ours really are specific to these utility-caused wildfire cases. and it matters. So I think that's a huge thing that people really should look out for, because we exist out there and we didn't just come out here for eat and fire, and it's important. And then I think another really important aspect of when they're searching for an attorney is to find someone where you're going to speak to an attorney, right? We use paralegals, we use staff, absolutely, right? It's very important to the effective prosecution of these cases. But we pride ourselves in our clients. They have our cell phone numbers, like if they have a question, they will call Santo, they will call me. We'll be on the phone with them, and we have the resources. So, we've been doing this, like I've said, for a decade. If we have the right person to point you to, we have a trusted contact to be able to answer a question if for some reason we can't answer it ourselves, but we almost always can, right? So I think all of those things, it matters. You all are going through one of the most difficult times in your lives, most likely, for a lot of you. And we have the answers, we have the way to connect you and help you move forward. And so I would just say, look for attorneys that are willing to offer that type of one-on-one guidance, because you need it and it matters.
Okay, and I'm not going to make this a huge sales pitch for you guys, but I am going to say, I'm going to address why we are here and why I asked you to, because obviously there's a million people out there. But the reason why I asked you guys was because you're the only people of all the people that we were connected to who said, hey, let us know when you're ready to talk. We understand that this is a really tough time and you've got a million other things going on. And, just that grace alone, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I got a text message. It's like, hey, I heard from somebody you lost your home in a fire. I've got a couple more spots if you're ready, but we gotta move fast. And you're like, who? I don't even know who this number is. Like, what is that? And I think it probably speaks a lot to that experience that you have, because I think you probably have a good idea of where we're at emotionally, right? As well as, I mean, just even like all the things we have on our plate. So can you tell me a little bit about some of the lessons you've learned along the way about working with people who find themselves, in this situation where they've lost their home and everything inside of it?
Yeah, I mean, Corey, you can jump in too, but I just, I've personally evacuated from a fire. I was lucky enough that I didn't lose my home. But I did evacuate with 2 young kids and 2 dogs, and I know what that's like. We were out of our home for, a few weeks, and, that's nothing compared to what some other people have faced. And so I personally know that the emotional aspect of going through this kind of experience can lend. And so we're very sensitive to that.
Courtney, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just say that's all exactly right. We've done this, like I said, each year in the last decade. And one of the things that we've learned really early on is it is one day at a time for people that have, suffered losses. It can be so overwhelming. This is the first time a lot of you have gone through anything like this, and your life literally turns upside down in the blink of an eye. And so, we're here, like I said, and there is no immediate rush at the outset. We find that it can be really helpful to be able to connect with our clients and be able to give them some tools that'll make it easier. But it is a one day at a time, and that's something that we've just come to learn, like you had said, from our overall experience in dealing with this. And if people are ready to move forward, great. We can do that, and we're here, and we do we like to move the process. But that said, your just mental strength in getting through it all is first and foremost what you need. And, we're here when you're ready, like we said.
Okay. So, we're touching on this timeline, right? And, I keep hearing from other neighbors about decision fatigue. I've felt it myself. I talk about how I feel like I'm only like on my best days at work, I'm at like 70% just because like there's so much going on, whether it be, the timeline for, debris removal or getting our permits submitted, tons of insurance stuff. So what do we need to know from a timeline perspective on like when we should be thinking about making that decision about working with an attorney? Like, like you said, it's not something we have to do right now, but do we have like a decision making timeline we should at least be aware of?
Yeah, there is. So every single case has what's called the statute of limitations, right? So that's a period where you have to file your claim or you'll lose rights to seek certain damages. So in fire cases, there's kind of two actual like deadlines, if you will. It's 2 years after the start of the fire to recover certain emotional losses. And then it's 3 years after the fire to do things that are solely, related to property. So we always encourage our clients to work on that 2 year timeline just because, the emotional aspect is such a huge part of these cases. So that is an actual deadline where Edison has to receive a formal complaint in the courts of your case to be able to seek relief in the way that we seek damages for. But that said, it can be helpful, like I had mentioned earlier, to start the process sooner. And there's a few reasons for that. One, again, right, we have a wealth of resources and information for you. So, it can start as easy as things that we don't directly handle in our case against Edison, but insurance. If you have insurance, these cases become so overwhelming with the insurance companies, right? Especially in a fire as big as the Eaton fire. I mean, the insurance companies, and they have to, right? They're shipping adjusters from all over the country to try and handle the analysis and the breadth of claims that are required. And it can be really confusing on what is my policy, encompass? What should I be entitled to? All of that. And we have a couple specialists on our team that can take a look at your policy, talk you through what you may be entitled to, look at the responses you're receiving from your insurance company and say, hey, is this right? Are they acting as they should be under what we're entitled to under our policy? So even something like that, right, can be important. And we do think giving notice of your claim to Edison is also important. The sooner the better, right? It's the first step towards resolution. If there's no claim on file, there's no claim to be resolved. And so we start to, file as soon as our clients, sign up with us. We like to give Edison notice of that claim and say, hey, here's a loss. Here's a case we're pursuing. And we also find it helpful to gather some damages information, as early as we can. Again, it's not necessary. We, do get clients that sign on closer to those 2 and 3 year marks, and we can represent them just as effectively. But there are certain tools that it can be better that we give it to you from the beginning. So certain evidence relating to your losses can be preserved and we can use it. And it just overall can, benefit and make the process easier on you all.
Okay. I'd like to learn more about this intersection with insurance, right? And because one of the things I've been thinking about is like we're trying to move really quick. And because our insurance said that due to it being a state disaster, that we get, I believe, 36 months they pay for our loss of use funds, which is, essentially rent. Let's simplify it. And we're moving quick. And I have no doubt that we will get in a new house within 36 months. But I'm talking to some other people who have more fears that it's going to be 4 or 5 years. How would that play out in a settlement with, insurance having certain things that they cover versus maybe nobody doing anything other than their due diligence to rebuild a home as quickly as they can? But, where does that intersection go when it comes to someone's case against Edison?
Do you mind go ahead, Santo?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So using your example, when that insurance money runs out, it would be that gap that we would seek from Edison on the, bucket of damages here that we're talking about, these additional living expenses. Or even if your insurance policy, if we find in our analysis that it might not have even have covered all of your additional living expenses, we would also seek that gap too, So yes, you're right. A lot of the standard policies will cover you either for an amount or a time frame. And unfortunately, sometimes it does expire, right? And there are shortfalls there. And then that is the area wherever insurance doesn't cover or you're underinsured, we would seek those amounts over and above insurance from Southern California Edison.
And I think a lot of people need to hear that, because I hear a lot of, I'm underinsured. I hear that a lot. Like, we don't know what we're going to do. We might not even be able to rebuild because we're underinsured. Now, if you're underinsured, you're not sure if you're going to be able to rebuild, but you do know at some point you're going to sign on with a great firm like Ellis and Rico Bono. You know, how should that affect your decision making as you're trying to navigate this all the next steps?
Yeah, so I would say, it's always important to do what makes sense for you at the right time. And we tell our clients that all the time, right? Look at your individual situation with what your insurance company has provided to you and other resources that may be available if you are having a shortfall on rebuilding. Our process does take time, right? And litigation never comes with guaranteed outcomes. So while we've, been successful and have successfully recovered, you have to move forward in what makes sense for you. There can be some, community outreach resources and then some governmental resources for emergency relief, such as, SBA loans or other ways that you might be able to fund if there are shortfalls in your insurance policies. But if you don't take that money and don't have the time to rebuild, just know that if you do have to have a place where you are expending, certain additional living expenses while you're waiting to see if we can recover those gaps for you to give you enough to rebuild, all of that can get rolled into what we would seek to recover for you on your behalf. But timing does become a factor with that, right? If you don't have enough to rebuild and we haven't gotten to a posture where we've been able to resolve cases, it's a situation where you might find yourself in a continued limbo.
No, makes a ton of sense. You got to be very, very careful with all of that. I think you worded it really well too. All right, so let's talk about working with an attorney like you guys. It's very common knowledge. We know there's no upfront costs and everything's based on contingency. Can you break down how contingency fees typically work in these type of cases, or if it's easier, just how your contingency fees work in these type of cases?
Yeah. So basically, our clients don't pay for anything until the case settles. We front all the costs. Anything, if we hire experts, we do anything on the case, or filing fees, that's out of our pocket. If we lost the case for some crazy reason, we never send a bill to our clients. That's just on us. So that's right. You want to make sure, if it's not us, that you have a fair contingency fee, because we've seen some of these, again, billboard lawyers from LA charging 40-50%, which is insane on a fire case. And then the cost as well will come out at the end.
What's more reasonable in a fire case from a percentage standpoint?
Yeah, 25-30% is kind of standard.
Okay. And are there, I wouldn't call them hidden fees, but more variable fees that might come along with that?
I wouldn't say there shouldn't be any variable fees. Sometimes costs take clients by surprise. Typically, we see them about 1 to 3% of the settlement value, but that just depends on what kind of experts get hired and things like that. So the more damages there are that would need an expert to help verify, there might be some more costs.
Okay. All right. Well, a couple months ago, before there was a fire, I don't think there were any true fire experts in Altadena, and now there's thousands of them, and they're all over social media, which is great. But one of the things I've been seeing that I'd like just a little bit of confirmation on from you guys is, if you sign with an attorney, all of a sudden, is there some sort of monitoring that happens to your social media or your public communications that might either, that might affect how the case goes, or your ability to get the maximum value out of the settlement?
Yeah, I mean, we tell all our clients to make sure that their social media is private. It's possible that Edison and their attorneys could be monitoring social media. I don't know about other public communications, but that's just to make sure everything that you say is confined to the people that you want to say it to. We would say it in any other kind of case too. I would recommend everyone have private social media, even if they're not involved in the lawsuit. But yeah, and then any other, there's some misconceptions that if you join the lawsuit, your rates will go up, your insurance is going to get dropped. I mean, your insurance may get dropped. Your insurance rates might go up. Your Edison bills might go up. That will happen if you join the lawsuit or you don't. We have no control over that, and neither does the litigation.
Gotcha. I mean, and that makes sense, right? Like the insurance, we know insurance is going to change after an event like both the Eaton and Palisades fires. Like that's just something I think the entire LA region and probably even state of California is recognizing, and it'll come with its own set of issues. But to your point, there's nothing that's going to be impacted solely because somebody decides to sign on with an attorney in this lawsuit against SoCal Edison. Gotcha. All right. So let's talk about the process of like signing on with an attorney. So you would say I get rid of all the other decision fatigue. I'm finally ready. I sign up with you guys. So what is needed next? Like, what do I have to put together next? Because I have to keep putting together all this stuff for everybody. Right now, it's the mortgage forbearance people as of today. If I sign on with you, what do I got to start putting together?
Yeah, so like I've said, we understand, right? Everything you guys have on your plate. And so we really do try to make it as least burdensome as possible. One thing I will say, if you have insurance and you're putting a lot of things together for your insurance claim file, we will get that claim file at the end of the day once your insurance claim file is closed. So you don't necessarily need to, reproduce or recreate everything that you're sharing there. So at least if you have insurance, that can be kind of something that's, might feel very overwhelming and a lot right now. And it's not necessarily something we need to duplicate for us. But what we usually do is, you sign the contract. We send our clients a packet of information that kind of lists out certain documents that are important to hang on to, right? Just so that you're aware. Hey, if you get a rebuild estimate or, any of the other type of out-of-pocket expenses that you may be incurring, do hang on to that. That all goes towards things that we'll want to see to make sure we're, encompassing everything you've lost. But all of that detail isn't necessarily something that we need immediate, right? If you have it, great. We like to collect it to the extent you can stomach it, just because it's good to get it into our system. It's good to start to be able to understand some of the losses. And then our experts do start to take a look at certain, losses that our clients have suffered. So, we, even just in this case, we've had our vegetation and landscaping experts out on properties, gathering some, information, at least from the start. We think that's important. But as for you all, other than kind of giving us a basic overview of your losses, which we usually collect from you when we, sign you up in the first instance, and then passing along kind of the information that kind of outlines some of the documentation we will need in time, there isn't a huge burden from the start. And in our firm in particular, there are questionnaires and certain things that will be approved by the court that every plaintiff will have to fill out and complete in the process of the case. But our firm, we do pride ourselves in, making sure that we don't just pass that off to you, right? We work on it. We work with you on it. And again, it's a few phone calls. It's nothing that is going to take hours and hours and hours, or really, exhaust the very little energy that you might have left in you at the end of the day to devote to the case.
Okay. And then how does it move forward as we go from liability to damages to mediation? Is it, one-on-one calls? Is it like almost like town hall webinars? How do you communicate with all the different clients that you're working with along the way?
Yeah, and again, that's something, at least for our firm, it's individual. So because your case is individual, I will call you, right? And I will say, hey, we got your claim file. We've had these documents from you. Do you have this? Do you have that? It looks like we may need a little more detail on this piece. And we make sure we work with our experts uniquely on each one of your losses. So if they need something more, I may call you back and say, hey, we actually, do need to come back to the site to gather this, or, we have these photos or information we have on an appraisal, and it's not, it seems like there might be something missing here. And we talk you through that, because those details matter. I've done this so much, and it's just so important to make sure that you really, under the law, we're able to recover and get you back to the pre-fire condition of your property, right? What was there before? What can we do in today's dollars to get you back to where you were? And every property is so unique and has so many specific details, and an attorney that doesn't dive into that is going to miss those specific aspects. So we're not that firm, right? We make sure we have that detail, and we gather it from a ton of different resources, so that at the end of the day, we know what we have to be able to maximize the relief for you.
Okay. So you're currently working through the liability, then we sit down and we go through all the different damages, right? And we get all of that information that do that through individual communication and meetings, which is wonderful. Then what happens when you start getting to mediation? Is there do you have a conversation with, your client and say, hey, this is kind of what we're hoping to get? Where does the client, where do they fit into the negotiation?
Yeah. The clients have to sign off on every settlement, right? So individually. So if we can't settle a case for you without you knowing what that is. So we'll have discussions before mediation, try to get your expectations, try to tell you if we think those expectations are reasonable, and, work through the whole process. A lot of times, we'll have our clients basically on call during mediation. So we're telling them what's going on, the numbers going back and forth, and then, hey, is this acceptable? This is what we can get you. So it's always individual, and we're making sure that our clients are informed the entire way.
Okay. Well, obviously nobody knows what's going to happen, but I can't imagine that my neighbors who are listening right now don't have one thing on their mind, right? Which is what this compensation looks like. And, nobody knows anything except, as you guys have alluded, you guys understand the nuances of wildfire cases. You've been in wildfire cases against power companies. Is there a way that you can explain through past settlements what Eaton fire victims might be able to expect without, making any sort of false expectations or whatnot? Do you have a good legalese way of explaining this where somebody can nod along and go, I think I get it?
I would say that it's so hard, and we get this question a lot, and it's hard to say what someone can expect monetarily in these kinds of cases without knowing the specific facts of each case. And part of that is too, like we said, we're getting what insurance doesn't cover. So we have to wait until we see what insurance covers. If this is a total loss, is it a partial loss? What's the value of the personal property inside, the contents? There's so many variables that I think I think it's a red flag for someone to say, every client of mine can expect $1 trillion from this case. Anyone that puts a number on it, I think shows their inexperience.
Okay. All right. I had to ask. I know you don't. I know that's a tough one to answer, but I had to ask because I know that's people want to know that. But let's say though, because this is another question I've heard from a lot of people that I don't know the answer to. Let's say 5 years from now, everything is done, right? And the money's cleared, whatever. What is the tax implications on a large settlement that you've seen from clients of yours in the past?
So one of the things that's been I guess unique or important, the legislature has actually stepped in certain past cases in California and has, issued some bills that protect certain settlements from wildfire settlements for victims from certain tax implications. So, we always have to encourage our clients, talk to a tax professional, because that's not us, right? We stay in our lane. And we know that accountants and certain other tax professionals do handle settlements, differently. And there's ways to work through that. But what I can say is, several of our clients in the past have been fortunate to fall within some of these protections in the legislature. I don't know that that's going to continue for this fire. And so we always just have to say, take your unique situation, talk to accountants, and talk to several of them, because in our experience, we find that different accountants do handle them in different ways. So, it is important to get a few opinions on that.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like accountants can be like the people behind the desk at the airport. It's like, if you don't get what you want from one of them, just go to the next one. Maybe they'll be able to help. Maybe they'll play a little bit of ball. Okay. So there are tax implications we need to be aware of. That's something we should speak to different accountants about, and based off who they are and how they operate, they might handle that differently. All right.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so through your firm's experience with all these cases, like, what have been like the biggest lessons you've learned from working with communities recovering after fires?
Yeah, so I think one of the most inspiring things that, and the biggest lesson that we've learned is the resilience of communities that have been affected. And I know that, we're only not even 120 days past the Eaton fire, and it may feel like there's just, still too much pain, too much devastation. But, the communities, when they unite, it can be so powerful, and it's such a key to get through it, right? It is one day at a time, but there is a lot of, support that you can find with your friends, your neighbors, your family, with community outreach, and then, advocates like us that can really be there for you. So I would just say, the biggest lesson I've learned is just the resilience of communities, and it's really incredible to see. And I think, they do thrive time after time. We've seen it again. They come back. It's not the same. It won't ever be, right? You can't expect that. But like I said, I think the biggest and the most powerful part of these cases is you all. It's the community itself.
All right. What do you guys, second to last question. What are common questions that you get that maybe we haven't touched on today that you feel like it's really important for Eaton fire victims to be thinking about or consider?
I know this is tough. You've been so comprehensive.
Any popular FAQs I haven't thought of?
I mean, I think we've covered pretty much everything, and definitely the most common questions. The only thing that I wanted to touch on earlier was when Courtney was talking about other firms and when people are advertising their past numbers, and to make sure that that's actually wildfire related. We've seen actually a lot of firms advertise the total number of settlements from California wildfire cases as their own. So if you see the number $13.5 billion, that is not that firm's settlements, recoveries for wildfire cases. That is for every firm, every fire that's ever happened. So it would be like a car accident attorney saying $7 trillion of accidents recovered, and that would be for every car accident ever in California. So I don't know if that number is correct. That's probably not, but that's something to watch out for sure.
Yeah, because there's definitely, I know there's things that you're allowed to say and you're not allowed to say. Like, I would love somebody to say, in X amount of fire, our average settlement was this amount. That would be a very nice advertising, just for me as a consumer. But there's certain things you can't say. And it's interesting to see people try and play with the language of the overall cases as opposed to, exactly what they did. But, I guess as we've all learned through this process, there are some desperate lawyers out there that really want your business and will say anything to get it. All right. So this is my last question. All right. I want to talk about hope. My goal on this podcast is to be a voice of hope, even if our community is currently a sea of outrage. Outrage most certainly will drive many of our neighbors your way, and it'll most likely play a role in a lot of the future negotiations that are going to be entered. I doubt many people are shallow enough to look at this whole thing with nothing but green dollar signs in their eyes. But I do believe, based off some of the conversations that I've had, that choosing to engage with an attorney can be directly correlated to hope that somebody can have our back, that we can be heard, that maybe something good can come out of this tragedy. Why should our neighbors, whether they sign with you or anyone else, be hopeful about what's to come?
Yeah. And, I touched on it a little earlier again. These communities that are affected by major wildfires, they bounce back, right? The power and the resilience that comes back after a major disaster like this is truly incredible. And we've seen it time and time again. So, I would just, urge everyone to find that support wherever you can. And, your community will come back. And there is hope. Don't lose it, because it is a process and it will have its ups and downs. But at the end, we've seen it. We're here to help. There's a ton of other community outreach resources that are there to help. And like I said, just you yourselves, stay together, stay strong, and just continue to look forward as best you can, because there is light at the end of this.
Awesome. All right, Courtney and Santo, thank you guys. This has been amazing. I really appreciate everything. Where can everybody go to learn more about you?
Fireattorneys.com is our website.
Fireattorneys.com. It's what they do. It's what they know. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.